She survived the mafia, the labor, the fear, but the doctor's tears put everyone in danger. The gurney hit the double doors hard. Eulalie Sinclair didn't scream. She hadn't screamed once. Not in the car, not when her water broke against the leather seat, not when Domenico's hand closed around hers so tight she felt every ring he wore. She breathed. She counted ceiling tiles. She did not scream. Move. Domenico Toscano didn't raise his voice. He never needed to. The nurses moved. An orderly who stepped into the corridor took one look at the two men behind Domenico, both in black, both with the particular stillness of people trained to be still, and pressed himself flat against the wall. The elevator chimed. Nobody got off. "We need Dr. Voss," Domenico said to the charge nurse, a woman whose name tag read Brigitte and whose expression had gone completely neutral in the way of someone who had decided survival mattered more than protocol. Now, not whoever is on call. Voss. "Dr. Voss is... I know he's here. His car is in the lot." Domenico glanced at her once. "Please." The please was more frightening than anything else he'd said. Eulalie's fingers found the edge of the gurney rail. The wristband snapped against her wrist. Too tight, clinical, indifferent. She focused on that small discomfort instead of the larger ones compressing through her in waves. "You're fine," she told herself. "The baby is fine. You are not going to lose this." She believed it. She had to. Down the corridor, a PA system crackled. "Dr. Voss to delivery. Dr. Voss to delivery." The man at the nurse's station turned. Doctor. Theodore Voss was 61, silver-haired, with the kind of face that had seen enough of the world to stop being surprised by most of it. He'd delivered babies for 30 years. He'd had guns in his delivery room twice before. Occupational geography, working in this city. He walked toward them with his chart under his arm and his expression professionally open. He looked at Domenico first. Registered him the way you register weather. Present, noted, managed. Then he looked at Eulalie. Then, routine, clinical, he looked at the intake form Brigitte was already holding out to him. Eulalie Sinclair. 29. 38 weeks. No prior complications. He took the form. The gurney wheels squeaked against the linoleum as they pushed her through the delivery room door. Domenico stopped at the threshold. His men stayed in the corridor. He looked at Voss the way men like him always looked at specialists. Like a tool being assessed before use. "Look at him carefully," Domenico said quietly. "I want to know he's healthy. I want you to remember this child." Voss nodded once, snapped on his gloves, and followed the gurney inside. He had no idea yet why those words would hollow him out before the night was over. "Hey, welcome back. Or welcome for the first time if you're new here. I'm so glad you found this story. Before we go any further, drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from and how your day's been. I genuinely want to know. And if you're not subscribed yet, now is the moment. Because this one will stay with you. Some secrets don't stay buried. They wait. They wait for the exact moment you've almost forgotten them. And then they walk into the light wearing an innocent face. The delivery room smelled of antiseptic and that faint, intrusive floral lotion someone had applied near the door. Eulalie noticed it between contractions. Small, strange detail, the kind your brain locks onto when the rest of your body is doing something enormous and terrifying and completely out of your control. Dr. Voss worked quietly, efficiently. He gave instructions in a low, steady voice, and his team matched his rhythm without friction. This was a man who had built a room around his own calm. Domenico stood in the corner. He hadn't been asked to leave. Nobody had tried. He was still in his suit jacket, arms crossed, watching Voss the way a man watches someone handling something irreplaceable. Not threatening, just present, with the full, a suffocating weight that presence carried when it was his. Eulalie turned her head toward him once. He uncrossed his arms, moved to her side, took her hand without being asked. She didn't say anything. Neither did he. 10 months of living inside the eye of his world had made words between them efficient, used only when necessary, weighted when used. Another contraction. The PA chimed distantly down the corridor. Dr. Voss to delivery. Already here, Eulalie thought, almost delirious. Already here. Voss didn't look up. "You're doing everything right," he said to her. Not performative reassurance, just a clinical observation delivered with unexpected gentleness. Almost there. Domenico's thumb moved once across her knuckles. She breathed, and then, at 12:19 a.m., in the flat white light of a Rains hospital while rain pressed against every window, the baby arrived. The sound came first, clear, immediate, indignant, a cry that had no interest in the tension in the room, or the armed men outside the door, or the 10 months of fear his mother had swallowed to get here. Voss caught him. Standard motion, practiced 10,000 times. He turned to complete the next step, and stopped. Not a pause. A stop. Full. Like a man who had walked through a door and found the floor missing on the other side. The nurse beside him glanced up. "Dr. Voss?" He didn't answer. He was looking at the baby's face. The child was pink and furious and perfect. Dark eyes squinting against the light, a faint shadow of hair, a jawline that was somehow already defined, already specific, and a face that didn't look like a newborn's blurred approximation of a person. It looked like someone. Voss knew exactly who. The chart in his memory opened without permission. A boy, 8 years old, dark-eyed, specific jaw, dimple on the left side, a missing persons file he had memorized over 10 years of looking at every dark-haired child in every room he entered. His son, Remy, gone since 2016. This child had Remy's face. Not similar. Not reminiscent. His face. Voss's eyes filled. The nurse saw it first. "Doctor." Domenico saw it second. His voice dropped to absolute zero. "Why is he crying?" Control is an illusion powerful people sell themselves. The moment something genuinely matters to you, you become just as vulnerable as everyone else. Domenico Toscano did not ask questions twice. Everyone in his world knew this. His lawyers knew it. His lieutenants knew it. The men standing outside that door in the corridor knew it. You answered the first time, completely, or the silence that followed was its own kind of verdict. Why? Is he crying? Voss heard him. The words landed with perfect clarity through the fog of what he was experiencing. That particular dislocation of a man whose grief had just walked back into the room after a decade away. He blinked, looked down at the baby in his hands, completed the motions, cord, weight, the immediate checks, on pure professional memory while something in his chest came completely undone. "He's healthy," Voss said. His voice was level. "Barely. Your son is healthy." "I didn't ask about my son." Domenico took one step forward. "I asked about you." The nurse, young, sharp-eyed, and named Celeste according to her badge, made the smallest movement toward the call button on the wall. Stopped herself, looked at Voss instead. Eulalie watched all of it. She was exhausted in a way that went beyond her bones. The specific depletion of a woman who had just done the most physical thing a human body can do. But her mind was clear, sharpened even, the way fear sharpens things. She watched Voss's face, and she saw what Domenico didn't. Domenico saw a man losing composure, a weakness, a variable, a potential threat to be assessed and neutralized. His eyes had gone cold and calculating, already running the scenario. Eulalie saw grief. She knew what grief looked like when it had been carried a long time. She had carried her own. It had a specific posture, the way it lived in the jaw, in the set of the eyes, In the deliberate stillness of someone who has learned not to let it move through them in public. Voss was losing that battle right now. "Doctor?" Her voice came out quieter than she intended, rough at the edges, but it reached him. Voss looked at her. She didn't know what to ask yet. She just knew that whatever was happening behind his eyes was not malice, not fear, not the performance of a man trying to manipulate the room. It was something true and old and enormous. "Is my baby okay?" she asked. "Yes." Voss steadied, visibly, like a man gripping a railing in wind. "He's perfect. 7 pounds, 2 ounces. Everything is exactly as it should be." He brought the baby to her. The moment he placed the child in her arms, his hands, steady for 30 years of deliveries, were not entirely steady. Domenico watched those hands. "Outside," he said quietly to Voss, "when she's settled, you and I are going to talk." It wasn't a request. Voss nodded once. Didn't look at Domenico. He was looking at the baby's face again, just for a second, just one more second, with an expression Eulalie would not forget for the rest of her life. Like a man seeing a miracle he didn't have the right to claim. The truth doesn't care about your timing. It arrives when it's ready. And it will dismantle every wall you've built around the life you thought was permanent. The corridor outside the delivery room was the quietest place in the hospital at 12:34 a.m. Domenico's 2 men stood at the far end. Far enough for privacy, close enough to matter. The PA system had gone silent. The elevator hadn't chimed in 20 minutes. The only sound was the rain against the high windows and the distant squeak of a supply cart somewhere on the floor above. Voss stood with his back straight and his hands in his coat pockets. Not a submissive posture, not a defiant one. The posture of a man who had already decided something before he walked through the door. Domenico faced him, jacket still unbuttoned, eyes that gave nothing. "You're not afraid of me," Domenico said. "Observational. Almost curious." "I'm a 61-year-old man who lost the only thing that ever mattered to him," Voss said quietly. "Fear requires something left to lose." Silence. Domenico studied him the way he studied contracts, looking for the clause that changed everything. "Say what you came out here to say." Voss exhaled slowly. His gaze moved to the delivery room door, then back. 10 years ago," he said, "my son was taken from a park in Lyon. 8 years old, dark eyes, a face that was already specific, already itself." He paused. "The case went cold in 14 months. I have looked at every dark-haired child in every room I have entered since 2016. Domenico didn't move. "Your son," Voss said, "has my son's face. Not a resemblance, not a coincidence I can explain away." His voice stayed level through what was clearly costing him everything. "I am not accusing you of anything. I am not making a scene. I am standing in this corridor telling you what I saw because I am a father before I am anything else. And if there is any possibility, any thread, any explanation, I need you to know that I exist, that I am here, that I never stopped looking." The corridor was very quiet. Domenico's expression hadn't changed. But something behind it had. A shift so slight that only someone trained to watch him the way Eulalie was trained would have caught it. He looked at the delivery room door, then back at Voss. "What was your son's name?" "Remy." The word came out worn smooth, like something handled daily for 10 years. "Remy Voss." Domenico was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice had dropped to something almost private, something that didn't belong in his vocabulary and clearly knew it. "I need you to write that down. The date, his age, everything." Voss stared at him. "You're not going to—" "I'm going to find out," Domenico said, "what I'm looking at." He held Voss's gaze. "And you are not going to speak about this to anyone until I do, not because I'm threatening you." A pause. "Because if you're right, you saying it out loud before I know the truth puts everyone in that room in danger." Voss understood immediately. He nodded. The elevator chimed. Neither of them moved. The people who built their lives on other people's pain always leave a trail. They can't help it. Every lie requires 3 more to hold it up, and eventually the structure collapses under its own weight. Domenico made one call at 1:15 a.m. He made it from the hospital parking lot standing in the rain without an umbrella, which was how his men knew it was serious. He never stood in the rain. He was a man of controlled environments. The call lasted 4 minutes. By 1:19 a.m., 3 people in 2 different cities were awake and working. He went back inside, stood outside the delivery room door, listened to the specific quiet of a room where a woman was sleeping with a newborn on her chest, a sound that had no language but was completely legible anyway. He didn't go in. He sat in the plastic chair outside the door, elbows on his knees, and he thought. Domenico Toscano had built an empire on knowing everything about everyone before they knew he was looking. Information was the only currency he trusted completely, cleaner than money, more durable than loyalty. So he thought now the way he always thought, backward from the fact, pulling each thread to find where it was tied. The fact, his son's face matched a missing child's description with a specificity that a 60-year-old doctor with nothing to gain had staked his composure on. The thread. Where had the child come from? Not Eulalie. Yet he knew that completely. She had come to him already pregnant, frightened, alone. The pregnancy was not his biologically. He had known from the beginning. He had chosen the child anyway, the way you choose anything that arrives in your life already necessary. But he had never asked enough questions about the father. He had not wanted to. That, he understood now, had been a mistake. At 3:08 a.m. his phone vibrated. He read the message, read it again, put the phone face down on his knee and looked at the ceiling for a long moment. Then he stood, walked to the end of the corridor, and stopped in front of his senior man, Raphael, who had been with him 11 years and had the particular gift of receiving bad news without expression. "Find Eulalie's ex," Domenico said quietly. "His full name is in the file Cesare holds. I want to know where he was in 2016. I want to know if he was ever in Lyon. I want to know if he has any connection to a child trafficking network that operated out of the Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes region between 2014 and 2018. Raphael's expression didn't change. "Tonight?" "An hour ago." Raphael moved. Domenico walked back to the plastic chair, sat down, looked at the delivery room door. Inside, his son was sleeping. He had chosen that child without condition, without biology, without negotiation. That had not changed. That would not change regardless of what Raffaele found. But if Eulalie's ex had taken a boy from a park in Lyon, if the child she had been carrying had been conceived from that, then the man Domenico needed to find was not just a loose end. He was the reason a doctor had wept over a newborn at midnight. And he was still out there. Raphael returned at 4:47 a.m. He didn't sit. Men like Raphael delivered standing. It kept the information clean, transactional, without the weight of shared furniture. "His name is Corvin Albescu," Raphael said. "Romanian national. Eulalie met him in Bordeaux 4 years ago. She knew him as a logistics consultant." A pause that carried its own punctuation. He was not a logistics consultant. Domenico said nothing, listened. He was a broker. Mid-level, careful, used legitimate relationships as cover. The network he worked for moved children across 3 regions between 2013 and 2019. Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes was their primary corridor. Raphael's voice stayed flat and professional. They have him placed in Lyon in September 2016, specifically the 14th. And the park where Remy Voss was taken was 4 blocks from his documented location. The corridor was completely silent. The network collapsed in 2019. Internal dispute. 2 arrests, the rest scattered. Albescu surfaced in Bordeaux by 2021 under a partial alias. That's where he met Eulalie. Another pause. She had no knowledge of any of this. Everything we have confirmed she was entirely clean. She was a target of opportunity, a stable, credible Frenchwoman who could provide cover and normalcy. Domenico looked at the delivery room door. "The child," he said quietly. "Albescu is the biological father." Raffaele held his gaze. "Which means the boy's maternal DNA is entirely Eulalie's. But his paternal line runs directly back to a man who was present in Lyon the day Remy Voss disappeared. Does that connect the child to Remy Voss? Not biologically. Remy Voss would be 18 now. The child is a newborn." Raphael's voice shifted slightly, careful now. "But the facial resemblance Dr. Voss identified is explainable. Albescu and Theodore Voss share a regional ancestry. Northeastern Romanian and Alsatian bloodlines overlap in specific phenotypical expressions. The resemblance is genetic coincidence amplified by the doctor's grief." Domenico absorbed this. Not the same child, not a miraculous return. A coincidence built from shared bloodlines and a father's 10 years of desperate pattern recognition. But Albescu had been in that park. Albescu had been part of the network that took Remy Voss. And Albescu had then built a life with a woman, conceived a child, and disappeared, leaving Eulalie alone, pregnant, and entirely unaware that the man who had fathered her son had stolen someone else's. Domenico stood. "Where is Albescu now?" "Marseille. We have an address." "Don't touch him." The instruction was precise, deliberate. "Not yet. I need Voss to know what we found before anyone moves. He has waited 10 years. He deserves the truth before the next step." Raffaele nodded once, turned to leave. "Raffaele." He stopped. "Eulalie doesn't hear any of this from anyone but me." Domenico's voice was quiet, final. "She hears it once, correctly when she's ready." Raffaele left without another word. Domenico stood alone in the corridor as the first gray light of morning pressed against the high windows. Inside, his son slept. Outside, everything was about to break open. The people who love us well don't protect us from the truth. They protect us during it. They stay in the room. They hold the weight with us, and they don't look away. Eulalie was awake when he came in. She hadn't slept, not really. She had drifted in that shallow, hyper-alert way new mothers drift, one ear always tuned to the small breathing bundle in the plastic bassinet beside the bed. The baby was asleep, deeply, indifferently asleep, the way only the newly born can manage, entirely unbothered by the world he had just entered. Domenico closed the door quietly behind him. She looked at him and knew immediately, not the content, not yet, but the shape of it. She had learned to read him in the margins, in the small deviations from his baseline. He was too still, too careful with the door. "Ma, sit down," she said. Not a request. Her voice was rough from the night, but steady. He sat, pulled the chair close to the bed, closer than necessary, which told her more than anything else. "Tell me." He told her. He told her about Voss, about Remy, about the resemblance and what it had sent him looking for. He told her about Raphael's findings, Corvin's real name, his real work, the network, Lyon, September 2016. He told her about the genetic coincidence that explained the resemblance. He told her what Corvin Albescu actually was. He told her all of it once, completely, without softening the edges. She listened without interrupting. The baby breathed in the bassinet beside her, that small, rhythmic, indifferent sound. When Domenico finished, the room was very quiet. Eulalie looked at her son. She thought about Bordeaux, about a man who had seemed steady and unremarkable and safe, which she understood now had been the entire point of him. She thought about the 2 years she had spent inside that relationship, believing she was building something ordinary. She thought about the morning she had found out she was pregnant and called him and heard nothing back. Silence. Clean disappearance. She had told herself he was a coward. He was worse than that. Her jaw tightened. She felt the thing she had promised herself not to feel, the impulsive, dangerous surge of it, and she remembered what it would cost. The men in the corridor, the doctor somewhere in this building who had wept over her son's face. She breathed. "Remy Voss," she said quietly. "He's still missing?" "Yes." "Albescu knows where he is." Domenico looked at her. "Yeah, possibly." "Then that's what matters." Her voice was even, deliberate. "Not what Corvin is, not what he did to me." She looked up from the bassinet. "That man outside lost his son 10 years ago. If there's a thread, even one, you follow it." Domenico studied her for a long moment. "You're not going to fall apart," he said. "Not a question. Something closer to recognition." "I'll fall apart later," she said, "when it's safe to." He reached over and took her hand, said nothing. The gurney wheels squeaked faintly somewhere down the corridor, slow and distant now. Nothing urgent, just a hospital waking up. Justice and revenge are not the same thing. Revenge closes a door. Justice opens one. And sometimes, on the other side, there is someone still waiting to come home. Domenico didn't go to Marseille himself. He didn't need to. But men like him had learned long ago that presence at the wrong moment was its own kind of evidence. He made 2 calls from the hospital parking lot at 7:15 a.m. The rain had stopped. The morning was pale and cold and clean. And then he went back inside and held his son for the first time. Properly. Both arms. No performance. The boy fit against his chest with the specific, unreasonable confidence of someone who had already decided this was a safe place to be. Domenico didn't speak. Just stood at the window with the child while Eulalie slept behind him, finally genuinely slept, and watched the city come awake below. In Marseille, Raphael knocked on a door at 8:03 a.m. Corvin Albescu opened it in a gray undershirt, coffee in hand, and had exactly 3 seconds to understand what was happening before the choice was removed from him entirely. He was not harmed. That had been the instruction, specific and non-negotiable. Bring him in, keep him intact, let him talk. Domenico wanted information, not a body. Bodies answered nothing. Albescu talked. It took 40 minutes and the particular persuasion of a man who understood that cooperation was now his only viable geography. He gave names, dates, locations. The network's last known structure before the 2019 collapse. The chain of custody, that cold bureaucratic phrase for the movement of stolen children, that had carried Remy Voss out of Lyon and across 2 borders. And then, quietly, like a man discarding something that had been too heavy to carry anyway, he gave the last known address. A small house outside Ghent, Belgium. A couple who had paid for a child in 2016 and had lived quietly ever since, banking on the network's silence to protect them. Raffaele sent the address to Domenico at 9:47 a.m. Domenico read it, walked to the nurse's station, asked for Dr. Theodore Voss. Voss came down the corridor with his coat already on. He had not gone home, had not slept, had spent the night completing his rounds with the automated precision of a man whose interior life was entirely elsewhere. Domenico handed him the phone. Voss read the address. He read it again. His hand, the same hand that had not been entirely steady at 12:19 a.m., was not steady now either, but differently. Not grief this time. Something that didn't have a clean name. The specific, almost unbearable feeling of a door opening that you had stopped believing would ever move. This is real," Voss said. "Not a question. A man checking the ground before he put his weight on it." "Raphael verified the chain 3 times, Domenico said. "Belgian authorities have been contacted anonymously. They will move today." Voss looked up. "Why?" he asked. Quiet. Genuine. "You didn't have to do this." Domenico glanced back toward the delivery room. She told me to follow the thread, he said simply. The elevator chimed. The life you survive shapes you, but it does not own you. What you choose to build in the aftermath, that is yours completely. That is the only thing that ever truly belongs to you. Remy Voss came home on a Thursday. Eulalie heard about it 4 days after leaving the hospital. Sitting at the kitchen table in Domenico's house with the baby asleep in the next room and a cup of tea going cold in front of her. Domenico set his phone down and told her in the same quiet, complete way he had told her everything else. Belgian authorities had moved on the Ghent address within hours of the tip. The couple had not resisted. Remy, 18 now, no longer the 8-year-old from the park, but carrying that boy somewhere inside him the way you carry every version of yourself you've ever been, had been located, identified, and returned to French jurisdiction within 48 hours. He had known his real name the entire time. He had never stopped knowing it. Eulalie pressed her hand flat against the table and looked at the window. He kept his name, she said. Yes. She nodded slowly. Something in her chest released. Not everything. Not the complicated grief of what Corvin had been and what she hadn't seen, but something specific and necessary. A knot that had been there since 4:47 a.m., when Raphael had stood in the corridor and dismantled her recent past in 4 flat minutes. She had not fallen apart yet. She thought maybe she wouldn't, not in the way she'd feared. Dr. Theodore Voss met his son in a government building in Lyon on a gray afternoon with a social worker present and a translator on standby who turned out to be unnecessary. Remy walked in, looked at his father and said, in French, his French, the French of a boy who had kept his language like he'd kept his name, "I knew you were still looking." Voss didn't answer for a long moment, then, "Every day." That was all. 6 weeks later, Voss requested a meeting with Eulalie. He came to the house, quietly, no ceremony, and sat across from her while the baby slept in her arms. Yes, Domenico was in the room, but at the periphery, giving the conversation its necessary space. Voss looked at the child for a moment. The resemblance was still there. It would always be there. That quirk of bloodline and coincidence that had cracked open a decade of silence. But it no longer hollowed him. It had become something else. Something he hadn't found the right word for yet. "I want you to know," he said carefully, "that your son gave me my son back. Not directly, not by design." He paused. "But if you hadn't come through those doors that night, if I hadn't seen his face—" He stopped. Let the silence carry the rest. Eulalie looked down at the baby. "He has good timing," she said. Voss almost smiled. "He does." The baby yawned enormously, indifferently, entirely unbothered. Domenico, from the corner, he had made a sound that, in a different man, might have been a laugh. Outside, the city moved through an ordinary morning. Inside, something that had been broken for 10 years was quietly, imperfectly, irrevocably whole. And that's where we leave them. Not without scars, but without chains. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Drop a comment below telling me which part hit hardest. And if you're not subscribed yet, you know what to do. See you in the next one.